Hey guys, how are you doing? Back from San Diego and San Francisco. I'm sorry it's taken me so long to do a video. I really wanted to do one or more of them from San Diego, but the Wi-Fi fucking sucks and it's just a beast. It's one of those cons that just every minute is scheduled, and you always think you can do more than you can do. There are people you want to see, you don't see. All of it becomes kind of a disaster, but it's huge fun. Thank you to everybody that showed up. I had such a good time with my wife. Also, thank you for being so nice to her. She vowed never to go back like years ago, and then I convinced her this time to go if we went for a short while, and you guys showed her such a good time that she's eager to go back too. So thank you for making me look good in front of her. Thank you for coming up and being so kind and giving us a great con. So, and thank you everybody. I just got back from San Francisco as well. I was there this weekend. I'm a little worse for wear, as you can tell. I can't really grow a beard. This is like 3 days unshaven. It just comes in all fucked up, like a patch of hair here, a patch of there, and I don't know, something is genetically completely mutant about me with that. But I envy you, Mitch Gerrits, in your beard. San Francisco, Brian Hibbs, thank you to Comic Experience for putting me up I was there for a 24-hour cycle. I flew there at 6 in the morning, flew back 6 the next morning. But you guys all showed up. I had such a good time, and Raphael Albuquerque was there, which was a big pull for me, and we went out and stayed out till 2, 3 in the morning on Lombard Street, trying to find pizza and anything that was open. So I really appreciate you making the time, Rafa. That was a blast, and it helped us plan a bunch of American Vampire stuff. So we got crazy stuff coming in about a year. So really excited about it. Anyway, so today I wanted to do a video about villains, mostly because, as you can see, I got my awesome Legion of Doom shirt. Legion of Doom comes out tomorrow. It's the 5th issue of Justice League, and so everyone's clear because I got a couple questions about when are you coming back to the book and are you leaving? The plan has always been that every 5 issues or so we were going to do a Legion of Doom issue, and that would show the whole story from the villain's point of view, and it would also give us a chance to reveal secrets, things that Lex has planned, why he's gone evil from being a hero, and also just click the story forward in a new way. So they're really special issues. Doug Mahnke is drawing the first one. James Tynion will be writing all of them. He's my brother in arms. And I'm just so proud of it, and I'm really hope you love it. It's sort of a double helix structure all the way through Justice League. So this is gonna happen all the way through for about 50 issues. About every 5 issues or so, you'll get a Legion of Doom special that shows everything from the villain's point of view, and then focuses on 1 or 2 villains and why they joined, what they're after, and then also gives you some cool plot reveals and stuff like that. So it's a great issue. I promise you. Check it out. And yeah, check it out. DC gave me this awesome shirt, even on the back. Look, Hench. They have Hall of Justice ones too that say staff or something like that. So you can order them through DC, I think. If I had enough, I'd give them to you. But anyway, let's take a look. Legion of Doom. So as always, I got my Batarang, but I already opened it, so I didn't want to trouble you guys with the whole tearing it apart process. Here's the main cover by Doug Mahnke, and we also have the we also have the Bat Flask. We also have the Jim Lee variant, Cyborg. You know, Jim Lee's just killing it with these variants. So at last time, you guys were super cool with my little preview, but my friends all fucking made fun of me for reading it out loud and doing it as like a PDF. They were like teasing me and calling me up and being like, "Oh, look at you," you know, narrating it and being like, "Once upon a time." So I'm just going to show it to you, but it's an amazing issue. Basically, it mirrors Justice League #1, so it has a similar structure. It kind of has this opening where it says, "There is no warning, tears well up in the Scarecrow's eyes, something's coming, something's happening." Just the same way we open with #1 with the totality coming and everybody around sort of the DC universe from the Monitor to DC 1 million all kind of sensing what was happening. But it also takes place right where we left off in Justice League 5. So Luthor is inside Superman. He has taken him over, and he is about to grab the totality itself. So it shows you the base the way we showed you the Hall of Justice, just the same way the Hall of Justice is. The opening panels of the Hall of Justice talk about how it catches the light and how Superman got the material it's made from the Butterfly Nebula. This one says the fortress catches none of the light from the molten rock it sits within. This is by design. So everything mirrors kind of what was going on in Justice League #1. I won't give too much away because it's James's issue and Doug's to crow about. But what I will say is that I really, really just couldn't be prouder of these guys, and it's just so good. And I really hope you pick it up. Oh, also, I'm going to be talking to Brian Hill later about villains. I have to take my kid to something called Gaga Ball, which is anyway, we won't get into it. But one of the things that I know you guys seem to enjoy from one of my videos a while ago was some of the art I have. I have not been a big collector of comic art, not because I have not always wanted to be one. I have, but I just didn't have the money when I was starting out, and I just never got into the habit. I always got stuff from the people I worked with. But I have a couple things I could show you because we're redoing our house. I think I showed you, but the kitchen's finally finished, but it was totally gutted. So in the process, I had to reframe a bunch of stuff. I showed you, I think, a Jim Lee and that stuff. So here are a couple pieces that I'm really, really proud of and just mean a lot to me. One is this. One is my Frank Miller. So when I started working with comic sketch art a while ago, Frank was with them too, and I had already known him and gotten to meet him a few times, and they had some pieces by him, and I spoke to him about getting one, and they gave me this one. He gave me this one, and I really, it meant the world to me to get it from him, and I really can't tell you how special it is to me. So Frank, thank you again. You rock. You're the Godfather. And the other one is from when I was 13 years old. I've shown it maybe once before, I think, in a photo, but it's extremely special to me. It's a Todd McFarlane, so it's from Spider-Man 319, and basically this is from when I was about 13 years old, exactly 13 years old. From around my 13th birthday, I went to Comic-Con with my father in New York, and I waited for maybe 2 or 3 hours to get a page from Todd McFarlane, and I had saved up my money, and I couldn't really afford that much, but I got up to Todd, and he had pages in front of him, and he gave me this page in front of the page that I could, instead of the page that I could afford. He was like, I'll give you a better deal on this one because it's your birthday and you're with your dad. And I'm not getting emotional, but it meant a lot to me, and I'll never forget that and how kind he was. And since then, I've gotten to be friendly with him and told him that. We were actually on the Howard Stern Geek Time thing, and I brought it and talked to him about it. But it really changed my perception of creators. You know, I had never really met one of my huge idols before. I'd never waited in line at a con, and the fact that he did that, and not only did he do that, but I'll show you. You know, I don't know if this is, he signed it, Todd McFarlane, but also he drew me a Spidey on the back. I don't know if you can see it, but it says thanks, and it's the Spidey right here, right? And he did that for my birthday, and that meant the world to me. So even at 13 to now, the memory is burned into my brain. So Todd, you rock. And that has nothing to do with villains. That's heroes, Frank and Todd. But let's get to villains. I really am excited to have Brian Hill on the show. Brian Edward Hill. We've been friends a while. I'm a huge fan of his work from some of the stuff he did before he was at DC to now. But what he's doing on Detective, he's just murdering it. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk to him. So thanks again. All right, bumper cars also, or whatever. Oh, whoa. Smile, good smile. Go ahead. There you go.
Yes?
Yeah.
Oh, close.
There you go. All right. There you go. All right. Nice. What? 3?
That's 3.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, dude, look at that. You got like a whole professional setup. You look good.
No, no. See, what happened? I was doing a YouTube. The guy that I follow, Jeremy, guy ACG Gaming. I like him a lot. Great gaming reviews and all that. He wanted me to be on his thing, and I didn't have a webcam or anything, so I had to go out and get all that stuff. Now I produce music, so I had a microphone. Because you got to see a little keyboard kind of over here. So like I already had a mic, but I didn't have a webcam, so I just recently got a webcam.
Well, it looks good, dude. I'm just like in my. We just redid our kitchen, and I'm like in the pantry, like hiding here. So.
That's dope, though. I mean, I'm corny, man. I got my LifeX bulbs, like I got my colored bulbs on either side, man. I'm doing it.
You look good, dude. It looks cool. And I heard, yeah, I remember you saying, what do you? So I forgot you were a musician as well, dude. You are a jack of all trades. That's pretty amazing. What do you play?
Well, that happens when you have a degree that is useless and expensive.
Philosophy, right? Yeah.
You have to figure out, like, what do I do in life? No, I just play keys, man. I play keys, and I used to sing in a band in college, and then I sang weddings for a little while to make some money. And just kind of like it. It's you know how it is when you tell stories for a living. Every time I tell a story, the back of my mind thinks about revenue. Unfortunately, right? With music, I don't have to think about that at all, Scott.
I totally get it. Yeah, man.
I just make stuff.
I keep trying, man. I got a ukulele. I got a guitar. I got if I had any skill, I would learn. But no, it's the same thing, dude. I remember my parents' face when I was like, because you go to college, they're so excited you go, they're paying your way, and I was like, I'm majoring in creative writing. It was like, it was just like the disown this kid moment. But they've always been embarrassingly supportive too, even when I've tried to like shake them off. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, are we on your thing?
Yeah, but we could start now. I could start. I'll start now if you want, and just sort of cut it back.
Might as well like make sure that the gold gets on the internet because we're.
This is the gold. This is
the gold. This is prime time internet gold.
Exactly, dude. 11 p.m., 11:30. The kids are asleep. I totally fucked this up because I wanted to interview you earlier, and then I forgot that I had a date with my kids to take them to the mini golf, go-kart, whatever. So I went there. I feel like, yeah, dude, well, we're still both recovering. I feel like San Diego is such a monster, and I went to San Francisco yesterday also, but I can't believe I missed you at San Diego, dude. I really wanted to, I was only there Saturday, Sunday, but I'm sorry I did. Did you have a good con?
Yeah, it was fun. Man, it was a whirlwind because San Diego is how I can kind of judge the exposure of my work, right? It's like my yearly gauge. So I started off going to conventions and like kind of hanging around tables waiting for people to make eye contact with me that never happened, right? Sleeping on like someone's floor who you didn't know, but you knew they were a friend and they had a floor so you could sleep there if you bought somebody something to eat. So those were my first con adventures. And now this last con was crazy. Like,
oh, dude, you're all over the place, man. I'm so proud. I don't mean that in a patronizing way. I mean, I'm just proud of everything you're doing in terms of being your peer and seeing how well you're doing at DC and all of it. I mean, I've been a fan for a long time with Romulus and everything for a while, but to see you just killing it now is a real joy. So.
Well, it's comics have always been my first love in terms of storytelling. It's just I never got to create comic books until much later. I kind of already had a career by the time comics had opened up to me. Because I went to NYU, went to film school. I grew up in St. Louis. So for anybody who's watching from the Midwest, shout out to the Midwest. Everyone should buy their comics at the local St. Louis shops because they all need their help. I think it's Wizard's Wagon and the Loop is a great shop, and so is Starfit for downtown. Got to plug the shops. So I grew up in St. Louis and went to film school because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to be a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever. And I graduated from film school, and I'd done a lot of writing in school because I didn't have a lot of money to make films. I could write. Writing was free. A legal pad and a pen. I was a writer, but making a movie, this is back when it was film, not video, $1,000 a minute. It was very difficult to do things. So I hung around New York for a while and met a bunch of comic book artists when I was in New York because they would all be working at Starbucks. This was back when everyone was working on, they had the mobile lighting tables, Scott,
Yes.
and then they would plug them in, and they'd be doing it on the big vellum.
I used to go, but it would make
So,
me. Everybody there was a writer, an artist, and it would make me so anxious that I would go home because I was like, these people are better than me, and I would just run
it was
away.
weird. Yeah, it was like you would go there and you'd get a cup of coffee and you'd see people that were doing DC pages and Marvel pages and Dark Horse pages, So I met like Christian Dabari, Nelson Blake, Afua Richardson, all those folks I met there, and then I met a guy named Walter McDaniel who'd done some work in the
Mhm.
90s,
Right.
in the Rob Liefeld days, and so I crashed with him for a bit. So comics were always around, but I didn't get opportunities until I think after I'd sold my first screenplay. I'd
Yeah.
written a
So
Dolph
when
Lundgren movie.
So when did you actually? What was your way in? I mean, I know we're going to talk because one of the things we'll talk villains and all that stuff, but I'm so fascinated by everybody's path in because I feel like I go on these panels sometimes and it's like how to break in, and everybody's story is like the worst advice where it's like there's no like real way in where it's like, well, I worked at Disney World for a couple of years as a janitor and did this and that, and like, and then like you'll hear Jimmy Palmiotti be like, again, another insane thing, and Sean similarly, like, I don't know, because we all are passionate about it and we all want to do it, but I feel like everybody's sort of breaking in moment is so interesting to me to see like where it happened for them. So yeah, how did you? So from going from philosophy major, college, film school, meeting artists, working in St. Louis, how'd you find your way in?
Okay, well, my personality has always thrived in attrition dynamics. Like, I just respond to adversity. It's just my nature. Maybe it's because I'm a Taurus. I don't really know what it is. So I knew I would want to write comics. I knew I wanted to figure out a way to do it, just like I knew I wanted to be a screenwriter. Just like I know I'll make a feature film at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And my approach to everything is the same. I just create as much work as I can, and I try to take my work to the water's edge of what I'm able to do, right? So that when I bump into someone and I need help, I don't ask them for help that I could have given myself.
Totally.
And I think that's a really important thing, So with comic writing, I just wrote a bunch of comic scripts. I would just write like Punisher stories and Batman
just
stories.
For yourself, just to learn.
Just for myself, yeah. I would just read work and just like, okay, well, I'm learning a little bit of this. I'm reading Scott McCloud. I'm studying Frank Miller, and I'm all the different, kind of influences that were important to me when I was a kid. Frank Miller, Grant Morrison,
sure.
Alan Moore stuff, Denny O'Neil.
Yeah, we're same generation. It's the same library.
Books that I'm talking about. Yeah, and I would just write a bunch of things, and I would go to conventions and talk to artists, and just befriend people. And I've gotten, and this is kind of specifically for people that are writers out there that are listening to this. I think it's really important to always share your love of storytelling. So more than just pitching your story every time you meet somebody, pitch.
Yeah.
Like, talk about story with people. Share that love, and people will kind of pick up, like, oh, man, this Brian guy, he might have a story head in his shoulders. Like, what would you do with this? And how would you address this character? And what would you do with this? And how'd you feel about that? And that was really what I did. And I would just kind of rack up interest year by year until people wanted to read me. Because the thing that you have to do is get people to convert from, I have no idea who this is, and I don't want to read this, to, I want to read this.
Right.
And hopefully you continue to convert them to, I heard this person was good, let me read this, right?
Well, and the thing that dude, you're so on point with that. Like, I can't reiterate enough to people out there that are aspiring writers how true what Brian just said is in terms of, because I mean, same thing with me. Like, I remember hawking American Vampire, like handing it to people, watching them. I think I said this earlier, even in this channel, but giving it to people, watching them walk 10 feet away, throw it out, and then I would get it, dust it off, take it back to the table. I was saying it earlier, like, give it to the next person. And what I realized sitting with Raphael at those cons was that the elevator pitch shit just nobody wants it. You know what I mean? Nobody wants to hear, here's my book, this is what it's about. And it's important to have that. But what's more important, just like you're saying, like the actual people that I wound up sort of circling back to when they needed help, and the people that helped me were the people who we just connected about story, about comics. Josh Williamson, he was circling, DC in the industry for a long time when I was. Sean, same thing. Like, you're old friends with it. It's exactly what you're saying. It comes more of a love of story. Even the editors like that I came up with, like Mark Doyle, Tay Taylor, who works with me now, she and I bonded over fiction stuff. Like, it's just what you're saying. It's like present yourself truly with about the passion you have for the craft, the story, and that doesn't mean like you go up to an editor and you're like 3 act structure, but I mean like
no, it's just be your enthusiasm.
Right, your enthusiasm, what you love, like what you love that they're doing, what you love that you've been reading that has some connection to them, or just in general, that it's so true, dude, because it really is it's such a neighborhood and a community. Like when I saw, when you see somebody breaking in, like I remember you from way back, and I remember you from when I was, when you reached out when you're doing Romulus and Postal and that stuff too. And, having gone back and forth in email, it's that sense of, this person's not only a good person, but somebody who just cares about craft, cares about the industry, cares about story, and you just connect over those things. And that's the stuff that I feel like people don't see enough, that the bonds between a lot of us aren't just like, well, we got thrown together on a book or we work at DC. Like, I'll tell you the truth, like Bendis, for example, right, who I'm friendly with now, like I became friends with him over family stuff. I called him because there were things I don't want to get into here, but there were family issues I was having, parent issues, and I wanted to ask him things that I thought, he seemed to have a really good grip on. And even that stuff, it's like, we work in such a tight-knit, small community. It really is sort of like you're saying. I think the connections you make when you're out there just throwing your elevator pitch at people, if it's an amazing pitch, sure, but the thing that helps even more, I think, is like you're saying, just connecting with people over passion, connecting with them over the stuff that you're reading that you love. They've worked on all of it, so yeah.
And just be around. Like I would go to New York Con and Comic Con every year. I couldn't afford to go to all of the cons, but those would be the places I would go. Mm-hmm. And I would do New York because I lived there for a while. I lived there 9 years, so I know how to be poor in New York.
Yeah,
so I could do that,
tell me about it, dude. I remember, right? You and I both. I'm sure we both seen it change a ton, and it was easier being poor, I think, when we were both there.
It was much easier back when I was struggling to be poor. Now it's all like, it's like Santa Monica is Manhattan. But back in the day, I had like a chart to kind of figure out how to make it work. So I could do New York, and then I would save up and I would do San Diego. Right. And at first, I was just around a little bit, and I would meet people kind of here and there, and eventually, people get familiar and comfortable with you, and all it takes is one person to take an interest. And so I have to give 2 shout-outs. The first is to Matt Hawkins, sort of a split shout-out for Matt Hawkins and Mark Silvestri, because they were the first. Top Cow was the first company to say, hey, do you want to write a story for us? And I'd had some conversation with Matt. So I credit Matt for getting me started.
He seems like a super nice. I shared a cab with him from a couple cons, and he seems like such a nice dude. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't be in comics without Matt Hawkins and Mark, and also Ron Mars, because Ron was writing at Top Cow at the time, and he was the reason why Matt and Mark were aware of my work, because I think I talked to Ron on Twitter or something. I asked him a format question, and we kind of went back and forth, and so he found me a short story in a Witchblade trade. And that was the first thing I did. And then I didn't do anything for like 7 or 8 months. But then, you get the next thing, right? So I tell people it's patience and persistence in equal amounts. And don't think about the end result of your career. Just think about what you can accomplish today. It's like,
exactly.
My football coach, right, used to say, don't worry about touchdowns. If you get 3 yards.
3 yards, right.
On this play, and we continue to get 3 yards of play, then the touchdowns will take care of themselves.
Well, dude, right? It's so funny because it really is. I remember, it's an endurance race, and all it is they're not like a million amazing comics under beds everywhere that just the industry is evil and shuts out when you send them in. It really is just that, to make something strong enough for anyone, for me, for you, it takes the revision, it takes staying up late at night, it takes having 2 jobs, it takes all that stuff and the idea that you're not going to show up, hand somebody your comic, and then magically make it in. There is sort of that runway that is, like you're saying, it's the 3 yards at a time. It's saying, did I have a good day today? Did I produce pages today? If that's where you are with your career, or is it like, did I send out my comic, to 5-6 people? or just being productive in that way, and understanding that it is your job. Like that's the thing that I wish I could communicate more to people, is that to demystify it. Because as a kid, I had this like magical idea of it, and my kids fucking think that it's like you get to stay at home in your pajamas and like a fairy muse. And I keep telling them like that is not it. Like you see dad stressed out, in the go-kart, but it really is that it is work. It is just like you're saying. It's saying, did I, even if I have a terrible day ahead of me and I have to do a million other things, did I put in my hours and punch my time card writing, even if I wrote shit? Like, even if, because that's to me writer's block too, is like that feeling of, it's just a fear of writing something bad, and that's it. And we don't like to do that. You don't like, on a day where I'm exhausted and I have like 5 things to do for my wife, 5 things to do for my kids, I don't want to write. But it's that feeling of you do it because it's your job and you love your job, and and it's like you're saying, it's how did I do today? Not did I write my masterpiece and that, and I don't know. Everything you're saying I so relate to with it, just in terms of instructional, inspirational advice to people out there. And I feel bad because I'm not the best at articulating it sometimes, because I feel like I get more about like, you can do it, but the nitty gritty of it is it's so prosaic and pedestrian in some ways. But it's just like you're saying, it's like, just do it, like every day. How did you do today? Did you do a few pages? Did you do this and that? So anyway, I'm down my rabbit hole of like, I'm actually saying it so that I write more tomorrow, where I'm like, I'm gonna write 5 pages tomorrow.
You're only competing against yourself, right? Like when I was in high school, I started studying Taekwondo because I
remember you telling me this. Yeah, right.
And I didn't want to be a big lumbering kind of Frankenstein's monster kind of guy. Like I wanted to move well and carry myself well, and I heard Taekwondo was a difficult style to learn if you were a bigger guy. So I wanted to take that because I figured that would, help me. And I was terrible at it when I started, like everyone is when they start. And my Kwon-young Nim, who is the Korean equivalent of sensei or sifu, if you're talking about like Chinese boxing or Chinese temple work, my Kwon-young Nim would say, "Well, we're just here to get all the bad kicks out, right? So this next year is going to be about getting all the bad kicks out until you have no more bad kicks, and then all you have are good kicks." And some people have 5,000 bad kicks. Some people have 500 bad kicks. But we're going to spend them all, right here on the mat until you have no more bad kicks left. And I think part of it is because I'm 41, right? So I'm pre-internet in a lot of ways.
We're the same. We're the same, dude. Yeah.
So the gratification comes very quickly in some ways now, but it also comes traditionally as slow as it ever did. But everything was slow gratification when we were growing up, like cassette tapes, right?
Dude, it was the letters, sending out the story and getting like the self-addressed stamped envelope coming back weeks later. It was the suspense and then getting shit on. Like it wasn't like now you get the immediate gratification of being rejected. Then it was like you had to wait and then get rejected.
It was existential, right? and nearly everything in our lives had some form of delayed gratification. If you saw a movie, it would take a year for it to hit video. You wouldn't buy a video tape because it would cost you $150, whatever they.
And then everybody would rent it before you at Blockbuster. You wouldn't be able to get it. It would just be those rows of empty fucking tapes forever.
just the cardboard box of RoboCop, no RoboCop tape.
Oh, dude. Right? Exactly. We can go down a whole RoboCop hole, but no, I know exactly what you're talking about, dude.
So, yeah. I was just gonna say the one of the issues I think is because so many things now are built around an instant gratification.
Instant gratification, yeah.
People judge their progress too harshly because they compare it to the gratification that comes the fastest. So I write a retweet, I get 700 retweets.
Right.
That means I get 200 followers. I'm getting instant gratification. How come my script isn't giving that to me? There must be something wrong with me or my abilities as a storyteller. It's like, no, things just take time sometimes.
Well yeah, and I don't know, man. I think about exactly that so often now, where because I teach the workshop at DC, and I love teaching. It's one of my like the great joy. I held on to it like in an actual format as long as I could, like going to colleges and teaching until I just ran out of time and ran out of space. But one of the things that was so fascinating was exactly what you were saying, where generationally I feel like now you're so used to the immediate and being able to kind of have this subjective agency over the way that you choose the things that you like or surround yourself with. You curate your own library of shows. Like my son's watching X-Files and My Hero Academy, and there's no centrality. There's no thing that sort of says this is the show that's on at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock that you all gather around the water cooler and talk about. And in that way, it almost is sort of, I think, a tributary of what you're talking about too, where you can kind of bubble wrap yourself in this stuff that says, these are the things I like, this is me, let me present myself, and the same way I want something, I have it immediately. There's such intense sort of, I don't know, myopic, with my kids at least, sort of sense of self that when they have to wait for something or they feel like there's a long, road to it, it's almost just totally short circuits them, and
Right.
with the arts, and with getting into writing and that stuff, it's not only just that to learn how to do it takes a while, but like you're saying, I think just you don't have the clearest path. You go to med school, then you go to residency, then there isn't even
Right.
that sense
Right.
of, well, I can see it even if I'm impatient. It's
Right.
really haphazard, and so that sense of patience and that sense of, like you're saying, generosity to things, I think is, it's just a different world now, and I wish I say that to the people that I teach too, but it's also, I don't know, it's like you're saying too, because I think also social media is so. I wanted to talk to you about villains and Detective Comics, so I'm going to circle back.
There's an easy
But-
segue between social media and villainy.
Sure, I'll let you make it.
So,
You can
I
make
think
it.
We're distilling it down, right?
Yeah, well, I think the thing with social media that I'll do it. I'll take the bullet with it. I think that the social media, to me, I think one of the problems, and I use it very, like I'm using it now talking to you, but the thing about this channel, or the reason that I'm doing this, honestly, is because I feel like so much of my social media is promotional. I used to be more political. I think the reason that I stopped doing that was my politics are the same as they've always been, but just because it felt self-defeating, honestly. I mean, I would have people just cheering for the things that I said, and then I would have people yelling at me, and ultimately on the forums like Twitter, it just felt ineffective, And I'm politically active. My family is, but it just felt like the conversation in that space for me, I felt more comfortable just sort of talking about the work, talking about this stuff. But I admire tremendously people that are, very engaged and very political and active, and vocal about the things that everything that they believe in. So I totally support that and welcome that. I just got, the experience for me was just that it wound up feeling, I guess, like a rabbit hole where there was, I had long conversations in DM with people that were great, that had different political viewpoints, and I'm friends with a lot of people that, we cancel out each other's vote like on everything every November.
Of course.
But that said, it wound up being just not a good use of my time for that medium. Whereas I think the things that I can do that are effective for the things I believe in, outside of social media, just I wound up being, investing in those more. That said, I think the bigger bad thing about social media is, like you're saying, a lot of the time we can get sort of caught in a bubble of how important it is, or how important it makes us feel moment to moment. And ultimately, I'll go on there and I'll see, I'll just see, it's very enticing because I'll see people say nice things about my stuff or friends' stuff, and I'll almost trip and go down the rabbit hole of being like, do go on, by like going back and forth or searching and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, the way that I think that it's villainous or social media is just that no matter what you say, no matter how many videos you make or this stuff, the work stands on its own, and that's the legacy of what you do and what you put out there, what you do in private, what you do with your family, what you do politically. That doesn't disparage anything you do publicly on social media. I support it and advocate for it or whatever, or welcome anyone that, I'm happy when I see anyone being vocal about anything they believe in, regardless there. But when it comes to writing and the stuff, the work stands on its own. And at the end of the day, history judges that. And so I feel like for me, at least, it can be very distracting. It can be a big, it can be something, a hall of mirrors, where I like to go in and see myself reflected beautifully. Other times I almost enjoy, in a pathological way, seeing myself reflected poorly and getting, angry about that. All that. It's just, it doesn't matter when it comes to you and the page. When you and your art, you and your writing, you and your
Yeah.
it doesn't mean you don't listen to people that have great constructive criticism. The first editor I had on an independent project on witches, at Image, was one of my biggest critics online, because his criticism was so great, David Brothers, that I wanted him to work with me and keep me honest. But that said, it's an easy rabbit hole to go down, I think, for both self-gratification and for almost masochistic, sort of self-punishing, I don't know, sorts of impulses that way. So it's the same way, like, it's just a distraction, the way research can be a distraction a lot of the time.
For sure. Like, I think about social media a lot because I'm just interested in the sociological effect of things, especially the sociological effect of technology, on a society and what it really means. And we have these platforms now that we are expected to participate on that empower us to create these narrow, underdimensionalized avatars that more people will interact with than will interact with us in
real life, right?
Right? And if you don't remain cognizant of your participation in that, it's really easy to kind of blur things and get things confused. And I talk to at-risk kids sometimes, about just developing self-esteem and how to get out of the situation, because I think they see in me, being like black guy, Midwest, came from a single-parent home, didn't have a lot of money growing up, I represent possibility for people.
Sure.
And it's strange, because that was never my intention, but I also recognize that if I was 13 years old and I knew there was a Brian Hill out there, it might have made being 13 easier for me. It might have been a thing, right? So I just talk about, we have to be very careful about where we put our self-esteem and where we give people the power to affect us.
Right.
And,
you said it the other day.
Not recognition. Yeah.
And I saw you say it the other day on Twitter, where you were like, you can't affect how other people think of you. You can only affect, you can only sort of control how you feel, what I always
say is you can't change how other people feel about you, but you can change how that makes you feel.
Yeah, I love your social media presence, dude. I think you're definitely a Zen master of it. I try, but I have moments myself where, because one of the funny things is, I think people don't realize sometimes, because we don't repost stuff, or I don't, the criticism a lot of the time, when it's constructive, it's so exciting. I love getting some criticism that says, well, this character, you write them this way, but if you tried this, then, I think this doesn't work. What you're doing, we all welcome that stuff. But,
right.
Yeah, they can come at you pretty hard, with Zero Year, a bunch of times over the years on Batman, you're a hack, you suck, if I see you at a con, I'm going to, that kind of stuff, and it's easy to get your back up and make it feel more important. I mean none of this is like when you're getting real sort of dangerous comments and that stuff. None of that is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like just the sort of the mundane kind of, you suck, you're a hack.
Yeah.
If I see you, I'm gonna,
stuff.
Just juvenile silliness. This is in no way is this the kind of like some of the more serious, comments that people have gotten over stuff that they've done in their work. But that said, just like you're saying, it's very easy to, I think, I don't know, for me at least, make me. It's just a very easy rabbit hole to fall down when it comes to what's important and what's not. I don't know.
You just have to be very careful about what you allow to provoke you. Like when I used to, so out of film school, I got some work in marketing and PR, a little bit more marketing than PR. And I was just doing research for companies, like tracking what people my age were into, because I was about 20, 21 at the time. So, I was in the middle of it, right? So, this is what we're doing here. This is what we're listening to. And I'd put these whole presentations together and give them upstairs, and nothing would ever come of it. But I became very aware of how many things are built to provoke us, right? Like, look at how women are advertised to and how men are advertised to. So men are sold products that are empowering. If you have, you will get, you will achieve.
Right.
Right? Women, every marketing thing, or about the large percentage of marketing opening salvos are all about creating holes in self-esteem. Is your hair bop, 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 bop? Is your skin dot, 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 dot? Right? Do you need to lose this dot, 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 dot? Right? And it affects things. And when you really kind of look at it, you're like, okay, I need to be more careful about what I really let in to my thought
What
process.
I let in. Yes, exactly.
Right? We have to engage our own filters, because and I haven't been Twitter Obi-Wan forever. Like, I think my first couple years on Twitter, I would get in these Donnybrooks with people, and I'd be arguing, because I consider myself like a Robert Kennedy liberal, so I would kind of get in these things with people, and I'd be driving up facts on Google, and then I realized, like, one, I'm never going to open up someone's perspective this way.
Right.
No one's going to walk away from this conversation and be like, well, that was a really interesting point that fellow on Twitter had to say. So I decided that it would probably be better if I demonstrated my ethics with behavior, and that became the essay of what I believe, right? So instead of arguing with a bigot, I'll just refute through practice all of their stereotypes and assumptions.
Right, but I know too, like in your private life, you're politically active, all that stuff as well. Like sure. That, but I understand what you're saying about letting stuff in, 100%. And I think it's incredibly sage advice for not just creators, but in general, now. But I feel bad because if I want to like loud your detective and talk about your work.
Right, sorry.
And do villains. No, it's me. I'm
everything into Charlie Rose.
No, dude. I'm like, this is. I could, because you and I know we've talked, many times, and I could talk to you about, anything for a very long time. But just as the clumsiest segue ever.
Yes.
About first of all, let me just take a moment to talk about how good your detective run is. And I had heard you and I had gone back and forth about your pitch. Yeah, of course, dude. About your pitch and the things that you're planning, and I know what you're planning post-detective, all of that stuff. And from the moment we started talking, the thing that impressed me the most, besides just your passion for the craft, your passion for the characters, was you had such a clear vision of what you wanted to do on an emotional level with these characters. It felt like, and segueing into sort of the stuff we were going to talk about, like villains, the conflict that you wanted to create. The villain was one of the first things you pitched, Karma on Detective, and then what you wanted to do with Project Post. It was always about sort of the ringer you wanted to put the characters through. And I was so impressed with that immediately. It wasn't like, here's the high concept and you had all that stuff too. You had, these are the characters and these are the repercussions and this is why this is going to matter and why it's going to catch people's attention. But almost the kind of, the keystone of it was that sense of conflict, of emotion, and how you were going to kind of psychologically torture Bruce and Jefferson and all of it. And so I was so impressed with that. And, again, sort of.
Thank you. That's like super, super kind. I appreciate it, Scott.
Oh, no. I mean, it's just the truth. But,
I was studying your work for a long time, right? So if you think that it's closer to the good than the bad, that makes me feel really good, because I was the guy like sitting, in my chair, looking at Court of Owls, turning the book upside down, like marveling at the fact that you and Greg got that done, And
thank you, but
it's just like, okay, this is hype.
That was Greg. Greg wrote
about the Batman. I wasn't reading Batman, and then I heard that your Batman was really strong, and it wasn't like I disliked Batman. I was just kind of on other things, and you brought me right back to picking up monthlies and going to a local comic book shop and getting the box together.
Well, it was funny that issue that everyone cites. It was like, it's such I'm not going to go down this is about you, so I'm not going to go down my selfish rabbit hole. But the one thing I'll say is that going back to sort of what we're talking about, not just villains, but sort of creating conflict and what's best for the book. That was such a seminal moment for me working on that. That issue was the moment I realized it can't be about sort of only me and what I think and what I want in the book. And Greg was the one that suggested turning it, and DC had really fought us on it. And he wrote this impassioned email where he was like quoting Steve Jobs and all this crazy stuff. It was great, and I was like what he said, and it was also the first time that I had stopped writing full script, and he had been asking me to sort of loosen up, and I had. So the fact that so many people cite that issue as something that was a good entry point for our Batman, or something that made them stay. To me, it really is. It's not only it a lot of what a lot of what I admire about what you're doing with Detective, to me, is the stuff that reminds me I should be doing more of that, like the issue 5, like what you're able to do, not just with your different artists, but even the way that you're sort of approaching the story. For me, the time you're taking with Alfred and Bruce, the time you're taking the scene with Jefferson and Alfred, the time you're taking, to set up Karma's background, all of that stuff is different than the kind of pacing I think we do a lot of the time on Double Ship, where it's very fast and it's not decompressed at all, but it feels perfect for the idea of a noir detective case. And so it just reminds me, with issue 5 and that stuff, it was the whole purpose of it was, how do you do something that's disorienting, that's in service of story, and that's different. And when I read your stuff, it feels like all of the sort of risks you're taking when it comes to the formal aspects of it, but also just the storytelling, all come from a place of emotion, of psychology for these characters, all of it. So it's really, honestly, I came away from the first few issues really inspired. It affected. I'm not shitting you, dude. It affected how I was writing Batman Who Laughs, where I was like, you know what, I want it, because I'm doing it with Jock, and I was like, the detective work and the stuff that you're doing is so grounded and yet really fresh and different, that I don't know, it definitely it hit a nerve. So I'm crazy impressed and grateful that you're doing stuff. It's always, when you pick up something and it's like, I want to write better, it's really nice to see. So
well, it's really challenging, right? Because when you have 5 issues to tell this story, and it's sort of happening parallel to the work that you're doing, in Justice League. It's parallel to the work that Tom is doing. It's coming right after what James has done, and
right.
all of that work is so good. I thought about, like, what can I bring to this that can complement what's happened before, but also give readers a good direction. And it's what I got from Court of Owls was, it's really interesting when the past comes to haunt the present, right? Because it's almost like an unexpected sort of thing, especially for a strategist like Bruce, because Bruce bases his strategy on a sense of what is and what is not, and when the past gets redefined, then his strategy has to get redefined. So, with everything that was going on with him, the large events that were happening in Justice League that he'd be a part of, like the heartbreak that he'd be going through with what Tom was going through, right. I'm like, well, this seems like the 2018 is the year of testing for Bruce Wayne.
Right. Yeah.
It's like he's on the psychological cursed wheel. Right? That's kind of what's happening. And I wanted to complement that by giving him a villain that put innocent people in Gotham in danger, and really brought the consequence of crime in Gotham to the front of it, and wasn't a legacy villain. And to DC's credit, they were super open with me creating a new villain. I'm like, hey, I think I got a guy that could be really interesting, and there's some mystery around him, and it sort of forces Bruce to have to confront some fears he has, and how he covers his fears up with anger and all this. And it seemed like a nice fertile ground to tell a story. There's and part of it's also my martial arts background, which I'm not taught for anything. I haven't really studied seriously in years, but the most frightening thing to do is to fight someone who feels like they just know what you're going to do.
Right.
And your technique is gone. Like, maybe you're telegraphing it, or they've studied you, whatever it is, but it feels like all of your powers are taken away. And for a warrior that uses psychology as much as Bruce does, to have someone be able to pierce that psychology felt like an interesting place to take the character. And yeah, I mean, and I was like, I like investing into those relationships and perspectives. You know, like I like to think about these characters as living, breathing people, and how they would feel, and hear them talk. And sometimes I act things out while I'm writing because I just have to put that bed sheet on my shoulders and be Batman for a second, and talk to Jim Gordon on the rooftop, and just kind of live in that place and hear the traffic that's happening, 25 stories underneath me, and the siren in the distance, and the cat meowing on the thing. Is that Selena? I don't know. And the sirens over here, and the thing, and whatever, and the Jim's drinking the coffee, and Batman, it's not your fault, and of course it is, Jim.
I love that line. Yeah, no, it was great.
That's it. Right?
Yeah, no, dude, it feels, it's immersive, dude. The way you're writing it is very, very immersive. There's no sense of sort of pyrotechnic cleverness about it. There's huge pyrotechnics and there's incredible cleverness, but it doesn't feel like you're performing. It feels like you're inhabiting Gotham, like you've been there a long time. You know these characters, and it's a joy to read. It makes them fresh for me. And so going back to sort of the idea of villains, what I love about the idea of Karma, the villain that you're working on now in Detective, is that Bruce sort of created him because of his own sort of beliefs, his own ideology, his own mission, and not giving too much away for people that haven't read it yet. But for you, is that something that, are your favorite villains, is Karma sort of an extension of the things you think make, the things that you think make a great villain in general, and what are those things? Like, sorry if that's a terrible question, but I guess to rephrase
it's a great question, actually. I think about villains a lot, right?
Yeah.
And villains, for me, define protagonists. They are the most important element in a narrative because they define the parameters of failure and the consequence that goes with it, right? And Batman, I've always looked at Batman's villains like they are specific extensions of him.
Right.
That they're almost like demigods born out of Freudian elements of his own psyche, right? I mean, the Joker, Batman, Order and Chaos,
sure.
Well-worn territory, we've all been there. But even down to the Penguin. Because the Penguin is a funhouse mirror version
of his class.
Of Bruce Wayne.
Right.
Yeah. Class, right? He's just this monstrous, opulent, a gluttonous thing that kind of represents the predatory, everlasting appetite of class. And so, with Karma, I'm like he kind of is Karma. And I wanted a villain to represent the strength of a sin that Bruce Wayne may have committed in his past that has come to haunt him, right? And I wanted the origin of this villain to be tied directly, not indirectly, because I always look at, like, Joker origins and things as almost kind of indirect, right? Where a person puts the psychosis together, like, I was doing the thing and then you dropped me, but you didn't really drop me, I just kind of fell.
Right. Yeah.
It's not your fault that the guy threw the acid in my face, but, like, I'm gonna blame you for it, right? So you have that stuff, but I wanted this villain to be someone that
directly,
it
was
broke
causal.
his mind.
Right. Yeah.
He kind of did something pretty awful to him, and now this guy is back and kind of come at Bruce in the worst time he could, kind of echoing. I mean, because Karma's got this helmet that lets him read thoughts.
Read thoughts, right?
And he was already sort of a sadistic guy going into it. He's always the embodiment of what you're most concerned about. And with Batman, he refuses to believe that the thing that broke him years ago and turned him into this thing has turned into a babysitter in Gotham. He just refuses. Like, it's almost like you can lose to something when that something remains majestic on your terms, but you will not have been defeated by something who has become by someone who has become a thing that you don't personally respect and understand. And so Karma's whole impetus is no, the man who broke me doesn't get to raise these characters, right? The man who broke me doesn't get to be hope. I was broken by fear, by vengeance, by rage, by fury, and you have forgotten all of that, and that has disrespected me. So now I need to evoke all of those things in you because I deserve
a better antagonist. Yeah. No, I love it.
Like, you don't get to do this.
I don't want to give too much away, but I really I honestly like I think you're doing something really special with it, and it's just a joy to read. So I and to people watching out there, I can ask for the scripts or I could ask for the the issues ahead of as they come out. But it's one of the few series where I don't want to because I just like reading it as it comes out because
thanks, man.
It's such a joy.
Well, we talked on the phone a little bit about it because I was working on Titans when I got the call asking me if I was be interested in it, and I was like, yeah, sure. And the first thing I said was, well, I gotta talk to Sky. I'm interested, but I gotta run stuff by Scott because I really want to bounce these things off of him. And since then, you've been super supportive. Tom has been incredibly supportive.
Yeah, he's amazing, dude.
I just met Tom recently at the Writers' Summit. I think that was the first time I had actually spoken to Tom. I mean, I might have passed him coming and going at a con. He was so open and supportive of everything. I'd ask him, I'd DM him on Twitter, be like, hey, Tom, would you mind if I, or could I? And he's like, dude, do whatever you want, man. You don't have to, yeah, but I kind of want to run a thing. And Peter,
dude, Pete's the best. Yeah.
He's incredible, right? So, I haven't worked on that many characters at DC, but I tell everyone that that office, everyone is like a human being. Whether it's Jamie Rich, Tom, just everybody, Peter, James, Tynion has been nothing but supportive of what I'm doing.
Dude, he really he was so happy to pass the torch to you, and he loves what you're doing as well. So, no, I mean it is I've been at DC a long time now, and I really believe it's the best era, out of all the years that I've been there in terms of the bench, and the writers that are there and how collaborative they are, how supportive they are of each other. And there have been great times before, but this one in particular, I mean, Tom is one of my closest friends, Josh and James, and just everybody on everything, Bendis. I mean, it really is we enjoy getting in the room together, and we love the sort of ideas being thrown around right now. And I feel like sometimes during the New 52, it felt like, there was sort of an ever-changing roster, and we would be flying by the seat of our pants. But DC really seems to be investing in the people that they have coming in now, and you're obviously one of those. And they want us to get together and talk. And even the fact that they've had so many more summits. I mean, I never had a summit for, the first years I was at DC at all. Now that we've had, multiple ones and gotten a chance to sit in a room and pitch each other what's coming, it's been great. So, no, I mean, and this isn't shill for DC moment or whatever.
No, it's just real. It's I work in Hollywood, I write TV, I've sold screenplays. I've done decent work in bad environments. I've done bad work in good environments. But hopefully, since this environment is so great, I can do good work here. And the last thing, not the last thing, but one of the things I want to say about villains is for writers, for those who are listening to this, that are watching this, who are writers, who are building their own portfolios and doing their own work, villains are an excellent opportunity for you to challenge and defeat the things that frighten
you at night. Exactly.
Yeah. It's super important. I'll tell a quick 90 seconds.
Yeah, so, please. I was about to ask you. So
when I came out of film school, I wrote a screenplay that I wanted to direct, and I didn't know how I was going to finance it. But people read it like the pros said, consider writing it a novel. So I wrote it as a novel. It was it was a weird kind of dark thriller. Fight Club meets The Fabulous Baker Boys. It's a long story. The point of it is.
That sounds interesting.
It was, it was a little angry young man book,
Sure.
Nick Hornby meets Frank Miller. Right. So, I'd written that book, and I shopped it around, and I got a book deal. I heard on a Monday that, just come in on Wednesday and sign the contracts, and then, you're good. And for me, it was oh, great. I'm real. I'm 21. I got a book deal. I'm going to be Norman Mailer. Everything's going to be all good. And then the next day was September 11th.
Oh, God.
I was in New York at the time. I woke up that morning because every phone in my apartment building was ringing at the same time. And I was in Astoria, so I got to the roof and I saw the second.
You could see, yeah.
Yep.
I was on one. I know what you're talking. I was up at Columbia. I was at 110
you were
right
up
then.
Columbia,
I could see
so
it.
You know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And I called in sick that day because I was like, well, I got a book deal to sign on Wednesday. I don't need to go to my temp job.
Right.
And because my book was dark and challenging and kind of violent, like like my work can be,
Right.
the publisher wisely was like, I don't know if this is the right direction for us to go in now because we don't know what the world is.
Sure.
Right? And I'm devastated about the attack. I'm devastated about my career. I'm ashamed because I care about my career while all of this real stuff is
Right.
happening in the world. I'm in a really weird place. So I went back to St. Louis, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe this writing thing, maybe this isn't the way I should go, right? I had a run. You did good, kid.
Right.
Figure something else out while you're still young enough to
At 21, right?
At 21, right? Because, you're 21, you can obviously pass judgment on your future at 21.
Right.
So I was like, yeah, maybe that's it. And I had all this emotion, and the only way I knew how to deal with this emotion was to write a screenplay, right? And it was going to be just like my cathartic thing, the last thing, and then I was going to try to work in advertising or whatever it was. And I wrote this screenplay about somebody who wants to quit, who's kind of brought into a mission to do a thing, and over the course of the thing, they discover why they can't quit, and they stay in the fight.
Sure.
That classic story that we've heard a million times. But after I finished the first draft, which came out pretty quickly, came out in like 6 days, I read it, and I'm like, well, if your response to being devastated and wanting to quit is writing a screenplay about why you can't quit, I guess you can't quit then, right? I guess, and it was confronting all of those emotions in a script, in the process of writing a script, that really helped me put them in context and get my feet up under me again, just emotionally and creatively. And that was the script that got optioned by a producer. It was that script that got to Dolph Lundgren. He read it, liked it, and then hired me to write the script that became the first thing that I written that ever got made, this Dolph Lundgren movie, right? So if I hadn't had written that thing based on all that horrible stuff I was dealing
Sure.
with at the time, there would be no career.
Right?
Because that was the thing, right?
That's those watershed moments. I had the same thing, both in books and in comics. I mean, I had a similar situation where I had before I was in comics, I had a book deal, and I was working on this novel that they had been very enthusiastic about, and then the economy sort of collapsed. All the stuff was, shrinking, and they had the same fears you're talking about, where the world had changed. They felt the book might be too dark.
You know exactly what it was like, yeah.
Right, but we were broke, and I was so desperate to try and make this work that I just kept asking them for notes and trying to figure out a way of writing the book that they would want, because I kept thinking, well, if I just get past this and I get to the other side, I'll be able to do what I want again. And it was miserable. I was at home. I was drinking too much at the time. It was just the worst feeling in the world to have the job you wanted and yet go to it every morning miserable. And that was when comics came along for me. I started writing, little things on the side, and that's what got me noticed by a couple editors. And my wife, God bless her, she's asleep upstairs. She was the one that was like, you haven't seemed happy working on this stuff for a long time. If you like this stuff, this comic stuff, let's take out another loan, just do that. And it was all I ever wanted to do. And shifting over, but the same thing that you're talking about, when I got to comics, I remember just being like, I will never, ever write a story again just to try and get by. I was like, because I knew I could go back to prose, or I knew I had other skills. So when I got here, that was always the mission, was for better or worse, live or die by the stuff that keeps you up at night. And going back to the idea of villains, it's that, for me, it always starts with that sense of, what are you afraid of? What do you hope for, and what are you afraid of for your kids? So the Court of Owls, like you were, for all the kind of hoopla around their, the fun of the ways that they've been remarketed and all that stuff, it really came from a moment in my life when I was completely felt homeless. I would go back to New York City, where I had grown up, and everybody I knew had moved away. My parents, still lived there, but everything about that neighborhood had changed. I had, friends that had bad things happen to them there, and just sort of bad life experiences, not in the city, but I mean deaths in the family and just big life changes, and had just grown up and moved away in all kinds of different manners, and it just wasn't the place that I had known growing up anymore. And that feeling suddenly of, well, Batman knows the city. He thinks that his whole pride comes from, his familiarity with it, how intimately he's aware of every nook and cranny, every gargoyle. If I could weaponize that sense of humility and that sense of of smallness that comes with realizing a city or anything that, any place you call home is only made up of the people that you know and the experiences that you share. And once those are gone, 5 years from now, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 100 years ago, whatever, you're alone. Do that. And then similarly with Death of the Family, it was fear of having another kid. As Joker saying, family makes you weaker and you don't really want this, let me kill them for you. And it was that watershed thing of realizing, like you're saying, when you were sort of trying to figure out, how do I write about all this stuff that matters to me? Am I ashamed? And is this not what I should be doing? Should I be doing high concept? Should I be doing stuff that's more about this moment in time? You have to be true to yourself and be like, what is the villain in my life? What is the conflict? What is the thing that I'm terrified of, for better or worse? If it makes me a terrible person to be worried about this, if it makes me a good person, it doesn't matter. But, articulating that and sort of making it tangible in a villain, in a comic, for me was cathartic. It was that feeling of, coming away from a book and a career where I had been, because that book it wasn't just a month, it was 2 years of working on that book, miserable, and we had just had kids, and we had bought a house because I thought, I had a book deal, and I was, I had borrowed.
You finished, you won, right? You got the book deal.
Exactly.
You leveled up.
Yeah, it was Random House. I had brought my parents to the publishing house. I had look at this, and I borrowed money from them. I mean, it was miserable. And so that moment you have, when you feel like, I so relate to what you were saying about, I'm never again going to write something, no matter what. I'd rather go broke and go back and work at, whatever, tutoring or whatever, than be working on a book that doesn't have a true villain, a true conflict to what I'm going through in that way, or what I feel is important to address.
It's an important aspect of culture, right? Like, it's philosophy doesn't have a natural place in our society anymore, right? We've sort of used education solely kind of in terms of trade a bit in high school, and then in college you can kind of engage ideas a little bit there, but everyone can't afford to go to college, and it's just not a universal sort of thing. Like, the universal engagement of ideas isn't something that we have now. And for a lot of people, especially as the world gets a little bit more secular than it was before, stories are where people engage ideas.
Sure.
Stories are where people think about right and wrong and good and evil and heroism and villainy and what matters to them. Storytelling is where we engage ethics. And when you are creating a story, especially something mythological, like a Batman or a Superman or, Martian Manhunter, what have you, the power of myth is that it helps us reconcile with the irreconcilable things in existence, right? It helps us explain winter. It helps us explain death. It gives us hope that harvest will come when it warms again. With the campfire tale, the sage would sit around the fire and tell the village, "Hurry not, for tomorrow the sun shall return." And we would create stories from this, and they would buttress us and comfort us, and they'd be things that we'd hold on to. And stories were that for me growing up. When I was a kid, my dad died when I was 7 years old, I think 8 years old. And you don't know how to process that as a kid. You don't even understand the finality of death at 7 or 8. Like, part of you's like, well, he's gonna come back, right? Like, adults come back, right? And having no idea how to process this, going into a comic book store, reading a book about Bruce Wayne, who was going through a lot of the things that you felt like you were going through, and you weren't a billionaire, and you didn't have Ra's al Ghul and all that stuff, but you certainly could recognize parts of yourself in there, and it helped lead me through those emotions. Star Wars helped lead me through it, and so I think it's really important that we think about the mythological impact of our stories, and I don't punish heroes because I'm a sadist. I don't, injure them because I just think it's interesting or provocative to do. I do it because at some point we will all be, without a hand, standing on an antenna, while the person we were certain we could hate is the person we thought we were avenging,
Right.
and our entire world has been ripped away from us. We're all going to be there at some point. So being able to see Luke come through that, it helps us figure out how we can go through that. So if you see Jim Gordon struggling with the fact that his son is a monster, and you realize that even a man as good as Jim Gordon, this can happen to him, maybe that teaches you that, that friend I have who I love dearly, who I've known since he was a kid, who's just kind of a bad person, and I know they're a bad person.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to recognize that. And that doesn't say anything about me, and it's not my fault, right? Like, maybe that's the lesson, you get out of James Gordon Jr. It's these things affect us in ways that are important. And I know that people read these stories because these stories matter. These characters matter to them. And it's really important for me to make sure that I am giving them as much of myself in the narrative as possible.
Yeah.
And I'm creating something that hopefully addresses some of the things that we have to struggle with, through fiction, through hyperbole.
Oh,
We
completely.
can figure out a way to face our days.
Yeah, when I'm teaching my class, I mean, the first thing I say to the students, I guess, if you want to call them that, is, you have to write the thing you're most afraid of. You have to be vulnerable on the page. And that doesn't mean that you have to immediately make it a memoir or make it. It just it can be it can be translated into the biggest comic book lunacy, like metal or whatever it is. It's just it has to be that stuff that you want these heroes to make you brave in the face of at that moment. I mean, that's what they're there for. For me, just like you, I mean, Bruce got me through very dark times and
he's
depression.
Great for that, right?
And,
like, he's so good for that.
Yeah, well, because and people joke about it where they're like, well, it's Batman always wins, and I make that joke. I will be like, well, who wins in a fight? Like Hulk or Spider-Man? Batman wins. Avengers versus X-Men. Who wins? Batman always wins. But the truth of that statement, or the thing that's so resonant about it and enduring about the idea that he always wins, is that he's somebody who was born of a senseless, meaningless tragedy. And the fact that he says, I'm human, I refuse to use magic, I refuse to use, all this stuff at my disposal to make myself more than just human, and I break and I hurt. But I will find a way to win against impossible odds. It's deeply inspiring in a way that, it's just so transferable to any situation that as much as we make it comedic, and I love making it comedic where it's like Batman, I love playing him for humor. But it's not that, that idea that he always wins isn't comedy. It's something that's deeply primally important about him, because he is the lesson that says, out of complete meaninglessness, some guy shooting his parents over barely anything, over pearls, he turns his life into this engine of meaning that says, this will never happen again, and I will make everything I do matter. And that lesson, it is the human experience. We look out, everything is mysterious and unknowable and confounding and confusing and upsetting and, and horrifying half the time. Things happen in your life that there's no reason for them. But Batman is the character who says, I find meaning in the meaninglessness all the time, and I say, get up and you will win, like me. And that's why I feel he's so appealing in so many ways, and it's such an interesting intersection of like pathology and heroism, like all the time. But that said, like, it's just like you were saying, where the job isn't how do you come in and you make something that nobody's seen before because you thought of some loophole that nobody's thought of plot wise. That's great if you can. The job is being able to say, I love this hero because he made me brave, or she made me brave in the face of something that really terrified me. And I'm going to do that for somebody else by placing my fears in front of this character in a way that's so challenging and so insurmountable that you'll never think they'll win, but they will find a way, And it is myth, it is folklore. Batman is like a folk hero to me, and that sense of and being, So it's such a strange responsibility in that way because you're carrying something or you're working with something that's so universal and owned by everybody, and yet the
Yeah.
only way to make it work is to get so intimate and familiar with it that you're writing your own terrors into that character and into that story in a way that's deeply confessional, and
Hmm.
it's such a you know what I mean? It's such a weird paradox. Like it's you're
Well,
working on a
that's the gift of writing, right? Like
yeah,
I tell people that writing has made me a better person, not because eventually I succeeded and built a career and all of that. It was making me a better person because I was facing all of the rooms in the mansion that is
I'm sure.
myself.
Yeah,
Opening all those doors in the cellar, in the attic,
sure.
dealing with it all, right? And it's it, it's important, I think, for people to recognize the the benefit of that in and of itself, even if the stars don't align and the book doesn't get published or the
Sure.
screenplay. Like I've written so many screenplays that have never made me a dollar, right? For everything that's made me money, I've got 7 that haven't. I've written
Sure.
3 novels, only one of them got a book deal, and that book deal got taken away. Endless comic book pitches, right? But they've all made me a little better, and as a person, hopefully
Right.
as a writer, but definitely as a person. And it's why the people, horror is such an important genre. And if you notice, all of the great storytellers have a perspective and a technique for horror, right?
Yeah,
Like
let's talk about that for a minute.
you have
I know I'm
one
like keeping you super late,
Spielberg,
but
like you see it. Like Coppola comes from horror, Cameron comes from horror. Like the way you weave horror into your Batman comics, and not just in like the really cool like splash page face ripped off kind of
Sure.
way, but the way that you build atmospherics and you pace things out and tension and all of that stuff. That's all stuff that I was paying attention to and trying to weave in there because
thank you.
it's it's an important genre, I think, for anyone to pay critical attention to because it will teach you a lot about storytelling.
Oh
You
yeah,
know, it'll help you. So no matter what, even if you don't write horror stories, just to look at the genre, just look at the monster in the cave narrative and what that means. It'll make your romantic comedy better, right?
yeah, yeah. Look at
Your
Romero.
biopic
I mean, yeah. I mean, to me, my favorite Frankenstein is my favorite book. I mean, Night of the Living Dead, my favorite movie, and it's not just because I like they're ridiculous reasons. Like I remember growing up in the city, there was a video store called the Video Stop on 26th Street and 3rd Avenue, and it was one of the last holdouts. And they wouldn't rent R-rated movies to kids, but they would deliver them if you called. So all of us got like every horror movie possible. It was like the height of the slasher movie stuff in the 80s.
Sure.
And the first movie that like stopped me in my tracks, we got Night of the Living Dead by George Romero, and I remember being so disappointed because it was black and white and being like, this is gonna suck. And
Yeah.
it hit me so hard. I remember having real anxiety, like terrible dreams about my parents dying, all this stuff afterwards, and I didn't really understand why at the time. And now, going back to this topic of villains and conflict and creating a good antagonist, what I didn't realize at that moment was that it was a movie where all of the tropes, all the ways in which the heroes won in every other movie failed in this one. And it was about hopelessness. It was about the monstrous nature of the human characters in the face of this kind of marching, slow conflict that was completely impenetrable. These zombies were coming, death was coming, and that pressure cooker was going to say, you need to show who you are. And everybody came up short in some way. And
Yeah.
the purity of that just devastated me. I was so... It made me and I had already loved Stephen King, but it made me so interested in horror from that point forward because to me, and I know this sounds hokey, but horror is almost the purest form of conflict. It's just compressed,
Absolutely.
pressure cooked conflict when it's done well.
Sure.
Because drama, you're up against these things that deep seated anxieties, deep seated flaws, but horror makes them try to kill you like right in front of you very fast, and you have to react to that. And that's why I love writing it in Batman and those conflicts, because it's almost like your deepest fears realized, made it material, and they're coming for you in a way when it's done right, like The Shining or Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Psycho, and these movies to me
That's why I fell in love with comics, Scott. Like
Right.
when I was growing up, comics were like pure adrenaline that would just fill your brain. You know, I remember the first time I read Batman: The Dark Knight Returns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too.
And you know, I don't know how old I was. I was probably too young to really read it, but you know, just that sequence where Bruce is taking the shower and he's like, "You cannot drown me, for I am you," and like the statue's falling and cracking,
right.
and he's standing there and a bat flies, and you're like, "Whoa!" And it's like setting off these little explosions in your mind, or like the cult, you know, like
cult, dude.
like. Yeah, like the cult was like, you know,
terrified me.
Reality isn't a pretty sight; it's a thing of agony and delirium, right? And you're like, "Yo, what?" You know,
and
like
when
Asylum, what?
So many moments in that book. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. Well, so that's why I love the medium of comics, because to be able to create experiences like that for readers. I mean, that's I can do things in the comic I'll never be able to do in TV. But I can do them in that medium.
Well, I wanted to ask you that too, and then again, I feel bad. I should let you go. It's so late. But for the thing I love, because I'm always curious about sort of working in TV and film, and then working in comics. To me, the thing I love the most about prose, I loved, but prose was so isolating.
Sure.
And just me, I love the collaborative aspect of comics. But comics, you have an unlimited budget. You have sort of very little. If you have good editors and people that support you and go with your outlines, you have very little sort of limitations and constriction on sort of what you want to do. Do you feel like they're very different sort of medium to work in, especially when you're dealing with trying to put things that are very scary to you, villains or conflicts that are deeply troubling to you out there, and sort of central, making them central to your stories? Do you feel comics offers you more freedom? Do you enjoy sort of some of the loophole, like the hurdles that you have to get over when it comes to things that have more contributors? Like,
Yeah, I look at it a bit like Russian nesting dolls, right? So like when I'm writing prose, I can kind of take as much time as I want. I mean, James Patterson would suggest I didn't do that, but like you can, like I can just feel like Tolstoy and whatever. And then a screenplay, you have to discipline it kind of quite a bit, because you got to get that whole story in around 110, 115 pages, right? Between 95 and 120 pages. So you got to be pretty efficient. And then a teleplay got to be even more efficient, because you got to get maybe even a 5-act Elizabethan-style narrative.
I'm sure,
in about 45 pages, right? So a lot of getting in late, getting out early, making sure everything counts, making sure plot's always moving forward with everything. And comics, for me, it's the smallest doll inside of the nesting dolls, because I have to be the most efficient there. Like
20 pages,
I've got 20 pages, 22 pages. If I've got one splash page, it's not just a splash page. I've got the page that leads up to it, because I have to rhythmically get there.
Right.
And then I got to come down from it, right?
Sure.
And so a splash page is really 3 pages. If it's a DPS, it's really 5 pages, right? So the efficiency of it isn't limiting. What it does is it distills and focuses what I'm doing, and it makes me focused on getting as much done inside of every panel as I can, right? Like, and I try to write with the Frank Miller rule, Scott. I try to make sure that a panel is a moment in time, and I try very hard not to cheat. So if someone's talking and there's, the art has a gesture and the gesture has an emotion, I try not to
double down,
break that emotion, right? Like I can't bring you from anger to resolution in dialogue if you're just in anger in the image, right?
Right.
So you end up, for me at least, it's like a lot of poetry to figure out how words can create feelings rather quickly. So it's like reading Anne Sexton,
right?
Or reading like William Blake or something. Like I need to okay, how do I get this done? And I like that, because I feel that my comic work is in some ways the most me, because it is so distilled into what matters to me, visually, and narratively, and I try to make sure I engage all of the senses.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it's there in your work. Everything that I've read by you is that way. It feels incredibly robust and sort of multifaceted when it comes to that, where you're thinking of every angle as you go in. I mean, I think also just it's interesting to hear you say that, because The structure of comics too, for me, it creates certain demands, like you're saying too, 20 pages, 22 pages, cliffhangers, and all of that.
Right.
But the inverse of that, the freedom that comes with not having collaborators beyond the collaborators that you're working with, like your artists and your meaning,
Sure,
not
absolutely.
a writer's room, not a those things to me are so freeing. It's this bizarre sort of combination of complete creative latitude and then
Yeah.
also tremendous sort of structural imposition, with the sort of the format of it in that way. And it's such an interesting blend. I'm
I
so
think that's an
used.
important aspect. I think the yin yang aspect of the rigors of the form combined with the limitless budget,
Sure.
and just kind of the free scope of imagination that one can employ. The relationship of those two things, the tandem relationship, I think is what creates the experience.
Oh yeah.
Kind of it, right? And like that, when I was rereading Witches the other day,
Thanks.
and the way that you can settle us down into just a kind of an intimate narrative about a family that we can absolutely relate to, and then we'll turn 2 pages and have this image of pure horror, just
Sure.
like Lovecraftian. If I look at it too long, it will drive me mad kind of horror, right? And it's finding how all that stuff fits in is like the fascinating puzzle kind of it all. And I'm learning my way around. I'm getting better. I think that this run of detective has really helped me to sharpen up kind of my tools, and I still read things. I do that differently now, and I change that, and I do that. But I am kind of getting to, I think, the place where I'm able to express what I want to express.
Well, it reads
in more of a direct way, kind of issue by issue, page by page.
No, I mean it reads flawlessly, dude. It's such a joy to pick up, week to week. So again,
Well, thank you, man.
Yeah, well,
I
let
want
me.
to be that Hollywood guy that wrote comics but didn't really write comics.
Oh, stop!
I wanted to be like a comic book guy that write comics.
No, it comes across that way entirely. Are you? Let me ask too. You're working on Detective now. Are there other things that you want to or can mention? That I know you're working on Titans. You're working on Black Lightning. You're working on.
Yeah, I'll just do a quick rundown, right?
Yeah, or things that you want people to know that you're invested in and care about and that you have coming out.
For sure. I mean, obviously my detective run, I think
Sure.
I'm very, very proud of it.
Yeah.
It's just a gift to be able to write a character that matters as much as Batman does to people. So I really want people to run out and grab that if they think I'm interesting at all. I'm working currently on a book, Aphrodite 5. It's an image book. It's kind of like RoboCop meets Ghost in the Shell, set in a near future Los Angeles, and
That sounds great.
It's cool, man. I never get to the cyberpunk kind of sci-fi sort of vibe.
Sure.
I don't get a lot of those opportunities in comics, so it was really fun to do that. I'm proud of that. I've got a book called American Carnage.
Right, at Vertigo. Yeah.
DC,
Right.
Vertigo. That I'm really proud of. That is about a guy who's black, but he can pass for white. He goes undercover into white supremacist movements in the modern day in California, in a blue state, to try to find a person who may or may not be guilty of murdering an FBI agent. And when he gets into the movement, he starts to see the different layers and tiers and discovers the humanity inside of the monsters. And it's about kind of him building this ethical crucible where he starts off as an enemy and then might try to save people, but can he pull out the people that can be saved before he gets corrupted
Sure.
by the same thing, right? So that kind of tale.
Doyle, just so you know, Mark Doyle, for anyone listening that doesn't know, he's the editor of Vertigo, and he and his wife Janine Schaefer, when they were on a date actually when they came to this reading that I was doing, and both found me together, and that's how I got into comics. So he's one of my oldest friends. Like an idiot, I didn't realize they were dating and wound up working for both of them simultaneously. And so I would be like, they'd be like, "How's it going at Marvel?" And I would be like, "Well, I never get any phone calls from my Marvel editor." And then she'd call immediately, and then she'd be like, "How's it working at DC?" And I'd be like, "I don't get any notes." Then I get a ton of notes, and I never put it together, with no Batman skills. But what I was going to say is that Doyle really raves about your book. So and he's again one of my oldest friends, and I trust his judgment tremendously. So
I'm really proud of it because it's not just like a one-sided diatribe. I really tried to treat the characters like human beings, and they're full of the same hypocrisies and hopes and fears and ugliness and beauty and the whole deal. And so I think that comes out in, I want to say, December. And I'm looking forward to people getting a hold of that, because if you're fans of things like Criminal or Scalped, Preacher, 100 Bullets, I think I'm not saying it's as good as that stuff, but I think it is in that same wheelhouse, and that's the vertigo energy that I bring. And then I was lucky enough to be one of the writers on Titans, the premiere series
DC
on the DC Universe, the streaming platform, and I think that premieres sometime late fall, I believe.
October, I think, right? Isn't it October?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm really excited about people seeing that. It's been a lot of like Gotham characters for me this year. And
you've earned your apartment. You have like a street named after you, or an alley, or whatever it is. Like, you know what I mean?
Got a little spot in Gotham. And I guess people can also find me on Twitter. As much as I kind of look at social media with a squint, I am there often because I'm doing research stuff during the day. It's just at Brian with a Y, Brian Edward Hill. At Brian Edward Hill. You can find me there and holler at me, yell at me, ask me writing questions. I can't tell you anything about the Titan show. You can ask me. I won't give you a comment, but feel free to ask.
I did. I even asked him earlier, and he wouldn't tell me. So he's on.
The Hill administration has no comment.
Puts his money where his mouth is with it. Yeah.
Yeah, got to hold it down. But I think that's just pay attention to that. I've got some announcements for some things that are going to come along the way. I can't really talk about right now, but hopefully I've got some interesting things coming for readers and fans. And I know. Once picked up a book so far.
No, I know you do, dude. And the stuff you're doing on Detective is great. And I know a couple things Brian has coming, and they're amazing. So I'm really grateful to you too for taking all this time and talking about everything. I feel like, dude, we got to do it again. I feel like I honestly I could talk to you easily for another 2 hours about.
I'm wading into the YouTube thing, Scott. Like I have a YouTube channel.
Yeah, you'd be great, dude. You're better than me by far. I'm just stumbling my way through it. I'm not very good at this part. I'm just sort of like, I'm sort of winging it. But I honestly did it just because.
I'm figuring my way around it.
Yeah, no, I just felt like, for me, I love doing interviews. I love, the whole publicity machine and doing that stuff. But I guess I just got tired of having to just kind of retweet articles where you're quoted and all of that. And when, you see, I wanted some kind of direct way to be able to talk to the fans and also just, I don't know, present stuff that I'm excited about that isn't even my own, or, talk about craft, all this stuff. So, I'm very grateful that people seem to be responding well. But I mean, again, I'm like a complete novice at this. I've seen you work all of it, like a room, all of it. I know you'd be way better. You should take over for me 100%.
I don't know, man. I'm getting there. I will figure out what to put on my YouTube channel. This month was creating one. Next month will be making something new there.
I'll come on yours, dude. We'll do the reverse. We talk about heroes instead of villains or whatever.
I would love to talk to you on my YouTube channel.
Let's
make that happen.
Absolutely, man. Well, thank you. I so appreciate it. And again, like, if everybody watching this, like, if you're not reading Brian's Detective Run, you have to read it. His older stuff, Postal, Romulus, is terrific. And the stuff that he has coming out post Detective 2 is amazing. And check out Titans, Black Lightning, all of it. So, great. Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Glad to be here.